Right now, there is a sound you cannot hear. It's below you, above you, moving through the air in your room at this exact moment, and your ears are not built to register it. On August 27th, 1883, that kind of sound was made once, at a volume no human being has ever measured before or since. People 4,000 kilometers away heard it clearly and went looking for the ship they assumed was firing its guns. There was no ship. There was an island, and the island was gone. Let's start with where it happened. Krakatoa sat in the strait between Java and Sumatra, in what is now Indonesia. It was not a famous mountain. It was not the biggest volcano in the region. For 200 years, it had done nothing at all. Then, in May of 1883, it started venting steam. Local ships noticed. Some sailed closer for a better look. Through the summer, the noise became routine enough that people stopped writing about it. On the morning of August the 27th at 10:02 a.m. local time, the volcano's magma chamber emptied and the sea fell into it. Seawater hit molten rock at over 1,000 degrees, and the entire northern two-thirds of the island converted into pressurized gas and rock in roughly 1 second. Here's what that produced. At the volcano itself, the sound was measured indirectly at around 310 decibels. To understand what that number means, you have to understand that decibels are not a normal scale. Every 10 decibels is a tenfold increase in intensity. A jet engine at close range is about 150. A gunshot beside your ear is about 165. And that will permanently deafen you. Krakatoa was not twice a gunshot. It was more than 1 trillion times more intense. At that level, sound stops being sound. There is a hard ceiling in Earth's atmosphere, roughly 194 decibels, where the pressure wave becomes so extreme that the low-pressure portion of the wave hits a complete vacuum. Air cannot get thinner than nothing. Past that point, the wave can no longer travel as vibration. It travels as a moving wall of pressurized air. A shock wave. Krakatoa crossed that ceiling and kept going. The sailors on the Norum Castle, 40 miles out, were the closest people who lived to describe it. The ship's captain wrote in his log that he believed his crew's eardrums had burst, and that his own were. He was right about most of them. Then the sound started arriving in places that had no idea anything had happened. In Perth, Australia, nearly 2,000 miles away, people reported a booming like distant artillery. On Rodriguez Island near Mauritius, the chief of police wrote that he heard cannon fire from the east and assumed a ship was in distress. Rodriguez is 3,000 miles from Krakatoa. That is the greatest distance a sound has ever been reported and later confirmed in recorded history. It's roughly the distance from New York to Ireland, but that's only half the story, because the part of the explosion that people could hear was the smaller part. The main body of the wave was below human hearing, infrasound. And it did not stop at Rodriguez. Barometers are simple instruments. They measure air pressure. In 1883, there were hundreds of them scattered across the world in weather stations, and on August 27th, they all did the same thing. A spike appeared. Then, about 34 hours later, the same spike appeared again. Then again. Weather stations in Britain, in Canada, in Russia, in Argentina recorded 7 passes of the same pressure wave over the following 5 days. The wave circled the planet 3.5 times in each direction before it faded below the threshold the instruments could detect. For 5 days after the island stopped existing, the sound of it was still going around the world. And here's the part that reaches furthest. The eruption threw roughly 20 cubic kilometers of material into the upper atmosphere, and it stayed there. Sulfur dioxide formed a haze that circled the globe and scattered sunlight in a way nobody had seen before. For the next 3 years, sunsets everywhere on Earth were wrong. They were deep red, orange, violet, and they lasted far longer than sunsets should. Fire departments in New York and Connecticut were called out to fight fires on the horizon that did not exist. Global average temperatures dropped by more than a degree. And in Oslo, a painter later wrote about walking at sunset and seeing the sky turn the color of blood and feeling something pass through him that he described as a scream through nature. Art historians still argue about whether Edvard Munch was describing a Krakatoa sky. The island killed over 36,000 people, almost all of them by the waves that followed. The sound itself killed no one. It just went around the planet 3.5 times in a language no ear was built to hear.